And Uncle Tom is somebody who has sold out by embracing the white man, by becoming a Republican, by rejecting the idea that you're a victim, by supporting things like hard work, accountability, and low taxes, by refusing to think of yourself as a black person first as opposed to as an American who is black.
Welcome to The Fallen State. I'm Jesse Lee Peterson. Thank you all for being with me. I absolutely appreciate it. Don't forget, you can support The Fallen State at thefallenstate.tv/donate. And we are locals, so click the link in the description to support our work. You're not going to believe who's here today. Larry Elder is here. Isn't that amazing? The sage of South Central Los Angeles is here. And I was thinking, how will this go today, this interview, this discussion? Because I know him so well. He's a friend. He's helped Bond over the years, my nonprofit organization. So we'll see how it goes, all right? He is a New York Times best-selling author, award-winning documentary filmmaker, and one of the best-known media figures in America today. Larry joined us to discuss his presidential campaign. He ran for president. It doesn't get any better than that for 2024. He also ran for governor of California. And I'm hoping that he runs again. I think next time it's over. It's going to be Larry. If ever we needed Larry, we need him now. Larry, thank you so much. Oh, he also has a brand new book, As Goes California, My Mission to Rescue the Golden State and Save the Nation. We're going to tell you how to get the book. Thanks, man, again for coming on.
Reverend Jesse Lee Peterson, it is my pleasure.
Amazing. So just call me
you left out the fact that the LA Times called me the black face of white supremacy.
I was going to ask you that.
You got to put that in there. I worked hard for that title.
Yeah. You know, before I get into all this thing, I know you've been through a lot. I remember when you first done radio and you would have me on, and people were attacking you from left to right. Mm-hmm. Calling you all kind of names and protesting, and that's been going on forever.
Right.
And how have you dealt with all that? How do you deal with it?
You know, Jesse, I get that question all the time. I've been called an Uncle Tom, bootlicking Uncle Tom, foot-shuffling bootlicking Uncle Tom, bug-eyed foot-shuffling bootlicking Uncle Tom, the Antichrist, black face of white supremacy. The thing I've rarely been called, and what would bother me more than anything else, is wrong.
Yeah.
I'll say something about taxes, something about regulation, something about what the welfare state has done to the black family, something about the dismal state of K-12 education in urban America. And people may attack me and call me a sellout and Uncle Tom, but I rarely hear the word wrong. Yeah. That to me would bother me more than anything else. Aside from that, Jesse, over the years, I'm sure you developed the same kind of hard bark. Over the years, you realize that when people say stuff like that, that means they're out of ammo. The thing to do if you think somebody is wrong is to marshal the facts, make an argument, here's why you're wrong. They can't do that, so they call names. It's silly. It's almost sad because it shows you they're not willing to develop anything, not willing to grow. Yeah. And we in the black community have a real problem with that, which is why we have so many problems, because somebody like myself, somebody like yourself comes out and say, look, the number one problem in the black community is not systemic racism. It's the large number of kids who enter the world without a father in the home married to the mother. It's a problem for America in general, but it's particularly acute in the black community, where 70% of black kids enter the world without a father in the home married to the mother, up from 25% back in 1965. And what's happened? The welfare state, launched by Democrat Lyndon Johnson in 1965, has incentivized women to marry the government and incentivized men to abandon their financial and moral responsibility. And when I raise this, instead of saying, let's deal with it, why is it happening, I get attacked, which means it doesn't get solved.
Yeah. I was wondering, your message is for all people. It's for all people, but especially black people. And if they were to listen to the message and follow a little bit of it, just some of it, their life would get so better. Has it ever bothered you that the blacks, not all, but most black people goes against the message?
Yeah, it bothers me because we're not going to improve the problem until we recognize we have it. A kid raised without a father, Jesse, is 5 times more likely to be poor and commit crime, 9 times more likely to drop out of school, and 20 times more likely to end up in jail. Now, it seems to me, if that's true, I would want to know what I can do to reverse that, instead of attacking the guy that's bringing the message.
Yeah.
I was in Mar-a-Lago with Donald Trump about a month ago when I dropped out of the race. We'll talk about that. And I endorsed him. And I told him that I ran as a mega candidate. And I said, I know we have a mega candidate. His name is Donald Trump. But I ran because you are not talking about some of the issues that are really affecting the country. Yeah. And if I can get you to begin talking about those, I would feel that my candidacy achieved its objective. And the number one thing I told him is the epidemic of fatherlessness. 40% of all American kids now enter the world without a father in the home, married to the mother. 25% of white kids do, which was the same percentage as was blacks back in 1965. And I told him that a young black male, aged 13 to 43, Jesse, is 13 times more likely to be murdered than a white male, same demo. He was shocked. He said, do you have a source for that? I said, yeah, the Centers for Disease Control. Have you heard of them?
Yeah.
And the number one cause of preventable death for a white teenager or white kid, 19 and under, is accidents, like car accidents or drownings or drug overdoses. The number one cause of preventable death for a 19-year-old black male and under is homicide, almost always at the hands of another young black male.
Yeah.
Now, it seems to me, if this is true, my reaction would be, good Lord, what are we going to do about it, as opposed to you're an Uncle Tom, you're a sellout, you're a bootlicker, you're just saying stuff for the white people. I mean, that's silly, and it means we're not going to solve the problem.
Yeah. Why do you think most black people reject the message? When they know, they can look in their own family, they can look in the community, they see what you're saying is true. Why do they reject the message?
Easier to blame somebody else.
Yeah.
Easier to point the fingers at somebody else.
Yeah.
Because if you don't do that, and you're on the left, and you voted for all these Democrats that have kept pushing these policies, you have to look at yourself in the mirror and go, oh my God, what have I done? And that's just a bridge too far for a lot of people.
Amazing. I wanted to ask you about that, but first I want to know, how do you see America now? Things have changed in such a negative, for lack of a better word, evil, drastic way all of a sudden. How do you see America, and do you think we'll ever come back to being America again?
I believe, at least I hope, Jesse, that the captain of the Titanic, had he known iceberg was ahead, would have taken corrective action. Yeah. So I think if you tell people iceberg ahead and explain it to people so they understand it, they will take corrective action. But it's going to take us, you, me, people like yourself, to explain to people that we need to do something about this. Yeah. I think we were at an inflection point in America when Barack Obama got elected, 2008. MLK gave an interview in 1964. This is right after the passage of the Civil Rights Act of '64, which, as you probably know, a greater percentage of Republicans voted for than Democrats. Yes. Republican, of course, is the party of racism. So it had just passed. MLK gave an interview. And he said, the changes in America, positive changes, the last 2 years, have surprised me. Why, if we continue in this trajectory, we could have a black president in about 40 years' time. Almost on cue, Barack Obama got elected. He didn't say, Jesse, in 40 years' time, we're going to have black CEOs of Fortune 500 companies, and we have. Right. He didn't say in 40 years' time, we're going to have mayors, black mayors of almost all the major cities in America. And right now, the mayor of New York is black, Chicago black, LA black. He didn't say that. He didn't say the head of the American Medical Association, the head of the American Bar Association, the 2 largest and most prestigious professional organizations in America would have black leaders, and they have. He didn't say the winning Super Bowl coach in the NFL is going to be black, and there has been. Yeah. He said black president, meaning once that happens, we can now say, to the fullest extent that it's possible, you're never going to eliminate all races in America, 350 million people, there are going to be some knuckleheads. But if a black president got elected, MLK said back in 1964, we can say it's done. Jesse, I was in Boston in 2004 when this skinny kid with funny little ears, a name nobody could pronounce, full of charisma, came out and gave that speech. He was introducing John Kerry, who was a 2004 Democrat nominee. And he said, there's no red America. There's no blue America. There's just one America. Yeah. There's no black America. There's no white America. There's just one America. We are one. It brought the House down.
Amazing.
He decided to run for president, and his first interview on 60 Minutes, he wasn't the front runner yet, but he was gaining on Hillary. The correspondent said, "Senator, if you don't win, will it be because of your race?" Now, I was home by myself. I know what kind of answer Al Sharpton would have given, who ran for president and complained about racism.
Yeah.
Jesse Jackson ran twice and complained about racism.
Yeah.
I know what answer they would give. I said, let's see what this man says. And Senator Obama said, no. If I don't win, it will be because I have not articulated a vision that the American people can embrace.
Mm.
I said, hallelujah.
Yeah.
Senator Obama was speaking at a black church. And he was talking about how much racism there is in America. And he said, the Moses generation, referring to the generation of MLK, has gotten us 90% of the way there. My generation, he said, the Joshua generation, has to get us an additional 10%, which I thought was reasonable. And I said, okay, that's the guy America thought they hired. Even people who didn't vote for him cried. I did. I didn't vote for him, but I cried when he got elected. Even people who didn't vote for him said, all right, at the very least, I don't want Obamacare. I don't want my taxes raised. At the time, he criticized the war in Iraq. At the time, it was popular. I don't want that. But at least he will stop the nonsense about America being systemically racist and bring us together racially. Even people who didn't vote for him assumed that. The polls showed that both blacks and whites thought race relations would improve. 8 years later, when he left, both blacks and whites thought race relations got worse.
Yep.
Because for the entirety of his 2 terms, it was race card after race card after race card, beginning with the Cambridge police acted stupidly. You remember that?
Oh, yeah.
White police officer in Cambridge gets a call from a neighbor in the neighborhood who sees this guy push open the door in the neighborhood. Didn't recognize him as Henry Louis Skip Gates, who's a Harvard professor, whose house it was. Didn't recognize him. She called 911. Don't you want your neighbors to do that? Looking out for you? Cop shows up, sees this man in the house, doesn't know if he belonged to the house, and says, sir, please come out and show ID. And what did this guy do, who, by the way, is a friend of Obama? I'll come out if your mama tells me to come out. So the cop arrested him briefly. And instead of Obama saying, you know, last night, I talked to my friend Henry Louis Skip Gates. I said, Skip, what are you doing? You're a Harvard tenured professor, for crying out loud.
Yeah.
The big problem in America with these young black men is they're not complying. And instead of complying with a perfectly reasonable, lawful order, you copped an attitude. That's what Obama should have said. What did he say? The Cambridge police acted stupidly. And it ticked off police officers all over America, and that set the foundation for his criticizing the police time and time again unfairly. Then there was, if I had a son, he looked like Trayvon, referring to Trayvon Martin. Okay, Trayvon Martin was shot and killed by a guy named George Zimmerman. Zimmerman stood trial for second-degree homicide. The jury found him not guilty. And those jurors who spoke to the media afterwards said, race had nothing whatever to do with it. That's what started, by the way, Black Lives Matter. People think George Floyd started it. It didn't. That's what started it. So Black Lives Matter got started over a premise, and George Zimmerman wasn't even black. First they said he was white, then it turns out he was Hispanic and Cuban or whatever it was.
Mess.
Wasn't even, you know, he was Mongol like most of us, mongrel like most of us, and he wasn't even white. That's what started Black Lives Matter. Then Obama said in an interview, racism is in America's DNA. The same guy who said we were 90% of the way there now says racism is in our DNA. His AG, Eric Holder, said, when it comes to matters of race, America has, quote, been a nation of cowards, close quote.
Amazing.
And Eric Holder gave a speech where he talked about America's continued pernicious racism, his term, not mine. And one example he gave was voter ID. Most blacks support voter ID. He had Al Sharpton over the White House over 70 times. Al Sharpton is America's preeminent race card hustler who became famous falsely accusing a white man of raping Tawana Brawley. He was in the middle of the Crown Heights riots in 1991, where he said, if the Jews want to get their yarmulkes on, come to my house, let's get it on. And one Jewish leader referred to the Crown Heights riots of 1991 as the most serious pogrom in the history of America, and Al Sharpton was right in the middle of stirring the pot. I can go on and on about the many things he's done. So Obama had him over the White House over 70 or 80 times. And At the end of his term, because of all this narrative about how bad the police are, a black man got a gun and murdered two officers sitting in their squad car in New York, execution style, just popped them. Another black man in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, walks up to 3 officers, kills them execution style. Another black man in Dallas, Texas, execution style murders 5 officers. All these 3 black men either told people or posted on social media. The reason they did it is because of this notion, this narrative that Obama pushed, that the police are systemically racist against black people. And the data shows that anything, the police are more hesitant, more reluctant to pull the trigger on a black suspect than a white suspect. They kill more unarmed white people every year. They kill more whites every year than they kill blacks. It is a lie. And it's a direct line between Obama, Jesse, and what happened beginning in May of 2020 when we had 4 months of protests over the death of George Floyd. Keep in mind regarding that, there were 25 people killed, millions of people who were protesting, a lot of property damage, $2 billion worth of insured property damage, maybe another $2 billion of uninsured property damage. Why? Over the assumption that Officer Derek Chauvin did what he did because of George Floyd's race. The lead prosecutor in that case was a black man. I'm a trial lawyer, and your most important statement in a trial is your opening statement, most important part of it, where you set the whole narrative. And he took pains, it was on television, to say the police in general are not on trial. He said most of them are doing a good job. They have a tough job. They have to make a split-second decision, life or death. It's hard. He said the Minneapolis PD in general is not on trial. And he mentioned some of the officers and officials he knew. He said this individual's on trial for what this individual did, and the black prosecutor never even intimated that what Derek Chauvin did had anything to do with George Floyd's race, and Derek Chauvin was never charged with a hate crime. Yet you had all these people out there destroying property because of this assumption that what happened to George Floyd had to do with his race. Now, I don't know about the political affiliation of the people that were protesting, but I assure you they would probably self-describe, if you ask them, are you liberal or very liberal, they probably would say, yeah, I'm very liberal. Yeah. The reason I mention that is that there is a website called policemag.com. And they asked people who self-described as very liberal, how many unarmed black men did the police kill in 2019? 50% of the self-described very liberal people thought the police killed 1,000 unarmed black men in 2019. 8% thought they killed 10,000. As to people that self-describe as just liberal, 39% of them thought the police killed 1,000 unarmed black men in 2019. 5% thought they killed 10,000. The answer, according to the Washington Post database, 12. 12? 12.
Like 1, 2?
1, 2. That's the gap between what people think is going on and what is going on, which is why so many people are in the streets rioting, because they think this happens all the time when, in fact, it is rare. And just because you're unarmed does not mean you're not dangerous or reasonably perceived as dangerous. Michael Brown, Ferguson, was unarmed. He had just done a strong-arm robbery, and his DNA was found on the officer's gun, meaning he was trying to get it. Right. So just because you're unarmed does not mean you're not dangerous. So there are very, very, very few instances of unarmed black people who are legitimately killed for unlawful reasons every year. There are more unarmed white people that are killed for unlawful reasons than there are blacks. It is rare for the police to kill anybody, let alone unarmed, let alone unlawfully. So you have all these people, young black men, who are told otherwise, pulled over by the cops. Instead of complying and cooperating, they're copying an attitude. And as a result, something is happening that otherwise wouldn't happen. My dad always told me, when you're pulled over by the cop, make sure your left hand is at 10 o'clock, your right hand is at 2 o'clock. Say yes, sir, say no, sir, say yes, ma'am, say no, ma'am. My dad wasn't a biologist, but he could tell a female cop from a male cop. Make sure your paperwork is in order. Right. And if you feel you're mistreated, get a badge number, and both of us will go downtown and deal with it. Instead, black people are taught the opposite. You're taught cops are enemies, and they're out to get you. And as a result, they're not cooperating, and as a result, you're having far more violent encounters than would otherwise be the case.
What a mess.
So I'm saying all this, in my opinion, is Obama. When he could have said something conciliatory, when he could have said something reasonable, when he could have said, calm the blank down. It is not true. He went the opposite way. And as a result, in my opinion, he took the country in a way that made us far more divisive. After all, this bright, well-educated Harvard guy who grew up under the care of his white grandparents.
Yeah.
Thinks
Hawaii somewhere, right?
Thinks racism is a major problem in America.
Yeah.
Thinks America is bedeviled by systemic racism. If Obama feels that way, it must be true.
Yeah.
And that's what he did.
Yeah, it's only gotten worse since then. It has not gotten better. Why do you think that you named the black mayors of the cities and all the successful blacks?
Governors.
Why don't they tell black people the truth about things? Why don't they say, well, look, you can make it, here's how I made it. Why don't they tell the other black people?
I think some of them are just hustlers, like Al Sharpton. No, he's not elected official, but Al Sharpton's just a hustler.
Right.
We all know he's full of it.
Like the mayor of Chicago, for example, right?
I just think he's an idiot. I just think he's just a very, very dumb person. I mean, how are you going to argue that the reason people are stealing is because of the lack of reparations? How are you going to make that argument?
Right. Well, you know better. I mean, you just know better. You're the mayor of the city.
We haven't had reparations. You know, we haven't had reparations ever. All of a sudden, there's a spike in crime. It's because of the lack of reparations.
Why do you think they won't tell them the truth? Instead of saying it's the family, it's this and that.
Because they will be accused of blaming the victim, and they'll be accused of being a sellout.
And so, but do they care about that more than they care about helping the blacks?
I think part of it's power. I think that if Barack Obama were here and he heard what I just now said about him, if he were being honest, he wouldn't have disagreed with any of it.
Right.
Why did he do it then?
Yeah.
Why? Because he wanted to remain in power. The Democrats remain in power by convincing 90% of black people to vote for him. How do you do that? When they've destroyed the family, when they won't allow school choice. There are 13 public high schools in Baltimore, Jesse. 0% of the kids can do math at grade level. 0. Chicago, 53 government schools. 0% of the kids can do math at grade level.
Amazing.
Yet the party elites, Barack Obama, Joe Biden, Elizabeth Warren, they have their own kids in private school while denying school choice for other kids.
Amazing.
And the reason for that is because the largest funder of the Democrats is the teachers union, and they adamantly oppose school choice, while, by the way, having their own kids in private schools.
Oh,
there was a study some years ago. Nationwide, 10% of American families have their kids in private school. 6% of black families do. In Philadelphia, 49% of the public school teachers with school-age kids have their own kids in private school. In Chicago, it's 39%. Out here at LAUSD, where you and I are, it's 28%.
Yeah.
So the people that know the school system the best, teachers, aren't putting their own kids in it. What does that tell you?
So then, why don't the blacks, not all, but most, why don't they think for themselves? Like for me, when I moved out here and I started hearing about racism, because growing up in Alabama, I didn't hear about this stuff.
Right.
At some point, I started thinking for myself. I'm looking around at Jesse Jackson and all these people. They're doing well. Their families are amazing, good jobs.
Right.
And I start to question things. Why don't most black people question what's happening?
I read your book, From Rage to Responsibility.
Yeah.
And you began to think for yourself.
Right.
A lot of black people just don't. They watch the same thing. They huddle around the same people. They complete each other's sentences. And so there's an echo chamber. In my book, As Goes California. Jesse,
amazing book, by the way.
Thank you.
And I'm black and I don't read a lot. But I went through it.
Well, wait for the movie. So when the campaign is over, I go to a restaurant on the west side of LA. LA is liberal, west side's even more liberal.
Right.
And I get there about 15 minutes before my buddy gets there. So I'm sitting there by myself, the table next to me, and these two elderly ladies, I think, felt sorry for me. So they start talking to me. And it turns out they're both 85 years old. They've known each other since the 2nd grade. One of them was celebrating her birthday. They were Jewish. One said she was a human rights advocate, and the other one said she was a psychotherapist. And then about 10 minutes to the conversation, Jesse, one of them said, wait a minute. I know you. You're that guy that ran for governor in the recall election. You're that Larry Elder. And they smiled and said, guess who we voted for? I said, you didn't vote for me. I said, how do you know that? I said, well, let's see. We're on the west side of LA. You're both Jewish. One of you was a human rights activist. You didn't vote for me. And they both said you didn't. They didn't. I said, let me ask you something. How do you feel about the crime? And they both said that it had spiked in their neighborhoods. They knew people that had been mugged. How do you feel about the quality of our schools? And they both admitted they would never put their kid in a public school in LA. How do you feel about the fact that people are leaving California for the first time? 1 million people have left the state in the last 3 years. How do you feel about that? We have friends who've left. How do you feel about the way Gavin Newsom shut down the state in a more severe way than anybody else because of COVID? We've lost 1/3 of all restaurants in California last few years. Almost all of them mom and pop operations run by black and brown people, the people that people like Gavin Newsom claim they care about.
Right.
How do you feel about all that? They all said it's outrageous. How do you feel about the homeless problem? They all said they had homeless encampments near their house. I said, so here we are completing each other's sentences, but you didn't vote for me. I said, have you ever had a conversation with a conservative Republican? And they both admitted they had not.
Had not.
Also in the book, I talk about this massage therapist. I have some issues with my back, which is why I take Relief Factor. That wasn't a plug. And a friend of mine told me about this really good therapist.
Yeah, back problem?
Yeah.
Hey.
Your trainer's going to help me with that too.
Right. Oh yeah.
So I get the address, and I'm assuming it's going to be in some office building. So I drive, and it's a residential neighborhood. And it's a house. So I knock on the door. Woman opens up the door. I get hit in the face with a big plume of marijuana smoke. Not that I would know what that smells like or anything. And she has tattoos everywhere. She has ear piercings everywhere. Her hair has 4 or 5 different colors. Probably not a conservative Republican.
Right.
So I walk in, she starts working on my back. And she's playing Motown music. And that's my favorite genre of popular music.
Yeah, mine too.
So a song would come on, My Girl. And I said, well, that was written by Smokey Robinson, and he wrote it for the lead singer of the Temptations. His name is David Ruffin, who died from a cocaine overdose. Then she played another song. This is a song written by Marvin Gaye. It's called What's Going On. And Berry Gordy, the head of Motown, did not want him to record that song because they had a factory where they had a songwriter and an arranger, and the singer just sang, but Marvin Gaye wanted to do his own thing. And so reluctantly, Berry Gordy allowed. So every song that came on, I had a story. And she said, about 20 minutes into the session, I know who you are. You're the guy that ran for governor. And when you called to make your appointment, I knew who you were then. I just didn't want to say anything because I don't agree with your politics. But had I known you were this funny and this personable, I would have voted for you.
Yeah.
I said, do you know any Republicans? She said, no. I said, well, we have personalities. We have senses of humor. You'd be shocked.
Yeah.
So, look, my long way of answering your question, why is it that people are not challenging this? They're around the same people who say the same thing, who don't challenge anything, who watch the same TV, who read the same newspapers if they read, and they're all echoing the same thoughts. We're oppressed. Republicans are bad guys. It's us against them. People who are wealthy exploited people who are not wealthy. That's the mindset. It's a Marxist mindset. Yeah. And by that, by Marxist, I mean this. Marx was the one that pushed the narrative that the world can be divided into 2 people, the oppressed and the oppressors. And that's how people on the left feel. That's how this woman at Harvard feels. That's how 85% of the Harvard faculty feels. That's what kids are learning right now. And it's destructive to the country.
Amazing. Are you part white?
Am I part white? I don't think so. I don't know.
So, like,
according to the LA Times, I guess I'm all white because I'm the black face of white supremacy. So
how do you remember all this stuff? Is there like?
Are you saying only white people have good memories?
Right.
That's kind of bigoted. not too stereotypical.
Are you looking at a computer screen up here somewhere? Because every time I see you on TV or anywhere, you know the information.
Jesse, people say that to me a lot, and here's what it is. For stuff I care about, I will retain it. If I don't care, I will forget it in 5 seconds. I couldn't tell you where I had dinner last night. If I went to a restaurant, nice restaurant, I couldn't tell you how to get there again. If it's something I don't care about, it's in one ear and out the other. But stuff I care about, often trivial stuff, I remember. I love sports. I love baseball. I love stats. And I will remember them. But in general, if I don't care about it, it's in one ear and out the other.
And so, I will keep my great-grandson for a minute. And I couldn't even remember his name. He's like, Grandpa, that's not my name. And I couldn't remember his name. So it's impressive to see you remembering all this stuff. And it's true fact. It's not like you're stumbling with it.
Well, Jesse, the reason this is important for me is if you're trying to convince people to rethink their assumptions, you need to give them the information.
Yes.
You just can't do emotion.
Yeah.
here are the facts, here are the studies, here's the information, here's the data, and often I quote left-wing people.
Yeah.
When I talked about the family, 25% of black families were raised without a father in the home. That was a book called The Negro Family, A Case for National Action, written by a guy named Daniel Patrick Moynihan. He was a Democrat.
Oh, yeah.
Later on, he ran for and got elected to be senator of New York. When I give you the stats about 5 times more likely to be poor and all that, that came from the CDC. So I try to use data where you can't refute it because
you do.
Because it's a conservative source, so therefore it must be biased.
Right.
One more thing before we leave this topic. 4 of the most influential black leaders in America, Barack Obama, he wrote a book called Dreams from My Father. His first book, which by the way was excellent.
Yeah.
It really was a very good book. The next books he wrote were just a bunch of political things that weren't of much substance. This was about his background. He didn't realize he was going to be running for president, which is why he was so honest. He wrote it when he was 28 years old. And it's all about the pain he felt growing up without a dad.
Yeah.
And he lied to his classmates and said his father was an African chieftain, which is why he was never around, when his father, in fact, was not an African chieftain. Last time Obama saw his dad, he was 10 years old. The whole book was about the pain he felt by not growing up with a father. Yeah. Jesse Jackson. There's a book called Thunder in America. It's not in print anymore. But it's about this young boy who grew up in South Carolina. His mother was a teenage mom who was impregnated by the married man who lived next door. And it was rare for a black kid to be raised without a dad in those days. And he was taunted, Jesse ain't got no daddy, Jesse ain't got no daddy, and it pained him. Al Sharpton. Al Sharpton had a nice middle-class life until his father ran off with another woman, and then down to the hood he went. Louis Farrakhan. Farrakhan's mother and father were estranged. Mother had a boyfriend. She briefly took back up with the father and got pregnant with Louis. And she tried to abort him with a coat hanger. Yeah. And my point in telling you this is that these are 4 of arguably the most influential black leaders in America, all of whom either had no relationship with their father or pain one with their father, but almost never talk about it. Instead, they talk about systemic racism and you're oppressed. Yeah. And they could do so much good if they told what happened to them and encouraged young people to be more responsible. Amazing.
And I do want to get to you about the father things, and because I know you grew up in South Central. While growing, I want to ask this first before we get away from this. I got so much, Larry, so you'll have to cut it short.
Okay. I speak quickly, so I'll get it in fast.
Okay.
All right.
Why don't white people, especially white conservative men, why don't they speak up for themselves? Why do they shut down when they're called racist? Rather than just saying, let them call you names. These people want to call you names anyway, right? They want to control you.
Yeah.
Why are white people afraid to speak up for themselves?
I ran for president, as you know, and I'm in Iowa, predominantly white state, and New Hampshire, predominantly white state. And I give a speech. And in my speech, I always talk about why I ran for president. And the first thing I say is I wanted to address the issue of the epidemic of fatherlessness. I give the stats. And almost inevitably, it's well received, my speech is. And when I'm done, people come up to me. Well, Larry, you're right about the epidemic of fatherlessness. I used to teach, and I saw the same thing. But I can't say it, because if I say it, they'll call me racist. You can say it. I said, that's a problem. Yeah. Malcolm X said, I'm for the truth, no matter who's telling it.
That's right.
You can tell it. And instead of balling up yourself in the defensive position when somebody calls you a racist, you call them out.
Yeah.
What have I said that makes me a racist? That's part of the problem. Nobody is willing to tell the truth.
I know,
for fear of being attacked. If you're white, you'll be attacked as being systemically racist. If you're black, you'll be attacked as being an Uncle Tom. Yeah. As a result, nobody says anything. I was invited by the then Ohio State football coach, Urban Meyer, to give a speech. He would have people come in once a month to talk to his football team, about 100 players altogether. And he had a Black Lives Matter type come in and got everybody all upset. And he heard my radio show because my show was syndicated in 300 cities, including in Columbus, Ohio, where Ohio State is. And he heard my show. And, you know, I have a very different perspective on that.
Yeah.
So he contacted me, and he asked me if I would come to speak to his class, to his football team. I said, well, Coach, you need to know something. I went to Michigan. There's this huge rivalry between Michigan and Ohio State. Long pause on the phone. He said, well, do you have to mention that right away? So I agreed to speak to his football team. I talked about the stats, about how the police are more reluctant to pull the trigger on a black suspect than a white suspect. I talked about a guy named Roland Fryer, who's a black Harvard economist. He's so brilliant, he's Harvard's youngest tenured professor ever, and Harvard is the oldest college in America. And he did a study. He's from the inner city like I am, from Baltimore. And he just knew that because of the high-profile shootings of people like Michael Brown and Laquan McDonald in Chicago and a guy named Freddie Gray in Baltimore, he just knew that this was happening all the time. He did a study. And he said, it was the most shocking findings of my professional career. Not only were the police not killing blacks just because they were black, they were more reluctant to use deadly force against blacks than against whites. So I said all this stuff, that's some of which I said here in our talk. And when it was all over, I went to the door so I could greet people as they walked out. And I took Q&A, and every single question was hostile, all from black people, and I handled them fine. They hadn't said anything I hadn't heard before. But several of them, when I walked out, said, I believe everything he said. Yeah. And I said, where were you during Q&A? Yeah. Even some blacks said it. Where were you during Q&A when I could have used you? And they went, well, this is my team. These are my teammates. I don't want them to be angry at me. That's the problem.
Yeah, that's amazing. One last thing. I asked you about this woman from Harvard.
Claudine Gay?
Yeah, Claudine Gay.
Claudine Gay.
And she resigned yesterday.
No, she didn't resign. She resigned president of Harvard. She's still a Harvard tenured professor. She still has her job, $800,000 a year. You don't have to throw a benefit for her.
Really? So she's like still working at the school?
Oh, yeah.
She's
still a tenured professor.
She's just not the president.
It takes almost an act of God to get rid of a tenured professor. She's still a tenured professor. She's no longer president.
Are the Jews aware of that?
Or the Jews? I think most Jews and Gentiles are not aware of it.
They're not? So they don't know that she's still there?
Here's the thing about Claudine Gay. Obviously, she's an affirmative action hire. Yeah. Her predecessor, Lawrence Summers, he had over 150 peer-reviewed published articles. She had 14. Talk about a thin resume. Harvard knew about the plagiarism allegations, and they essentially overlooked them. And here's what's fascinating. One of the professors whose work she plagiarized is a woman named Carol Swain.
Yeah, I want to ask you about her.
I know Carol Swain. She's a professor, now retired, taught law at Vanderbilt for many, many years. I have no idea whether Harvard ever approached her with a job offer, but I doubt it. So her work was good enough for a Harvard professor to steal, but it wasn't good enough for Harvard to offer Carol Swain a job. What does that tell you? Also this, only about 3% of Harvard professors identify as Republican. 3%. That means 97% of them do not. So getting rid of Claudine Gay does not change the culture of Harvard at all. Remember when she was under fire, 500 Harvard faculty members wrote a letter saying, don't fire her. Yeah. So they all think the same way about Hamas, about Israel, about DEI, about race-based preferences, about all this nonsense. Harvard's culture is rotten from the top to the bottom. The only way to change it is to hire a whole bunch of people, professors, that think like you and I think. Yeah. And they're not going to do that. They're
not doing it. No way.
No. So, and 90% of the political contributions from the Ivy League professors go to Democrats. 3.4% of reporters self-describe as Republican. The rest of them, something else. So this is a culture that we're in. This is why we're in the situation we're in right now. The newspapers are consumed with climate change. They're consumed with the issue of abortion. They're consumed with the issue of what they believe to be systemic racism. Yeah. But about fatherlessness, about bad schools, about crime in the inner city,
no problem. Where's the Wicked Witch of the West with the low IQ? I haven't heard
Maxine Waters?
Yeah, I haven't heard about her.
I have a Maxine Waters story. When I was at KABC, Gloria Allred, the feminist attorney, also had a show.
Yeah, I remember that.
And Gloria and I are good friends, even though we don't agree on anything.
Right.
And Gloria would have Maxine Waters on her show all the time. And when I tried to get Maxine Waters on, she wouldn't come on. I tried to get Jesse Jackson on over 100 times, wouldn't come on. Al Sharpton over 100 times, wouldn't come on. Louis Farrakhan, I've invited him 50 times, he wouldn't come on. Maxine Waters about 100 times, wouldn't come on. And I said, Gloria, could you do me a favor? We were on the air when I said this. I said, would you please ask Maxine Waters the next time you have her on your show why she won't come on Larry Elder's show? Gloria said, yeah, I'll ask her. And she did. So they're on the air, and Gloria said, my friend Larry Elder, he's always asking me about you, and he wants to know why you won't come on his show. And Maxine Waters said, well, you know, I know who he is. He talked a lot about me. I don't know that much about him, but you know, Gloria, I don't deal with entertainers. He's an entertainer. Gloria, you are a serious journalist. That's why I'm on your show. So he's just an entertainer. I don't want to.
What a coward.
And I remember her being interviewed by a young black man who has a show about the inner city. And he said to her, why is it we have so much crime in the inner city and a gang problem? And Maxine Waters said, I don't really know. And she went on to something else.
Yeah.
You don't know the reason we have a gang problem and crime is because kids don't have dads in the house? You don't know this?
Well, she really doesn't care. That's why she said, I don't know. I don't care.
It's pathetic.
Yeah. What's wrong with, and now I got to move on there.
Okay.
What's wrong with men and women today? They're so divided. You know, a lot of guys complaining they can't find the right woman to date, and the women are expecting guys to spend money on them, expensive hotel cafes and travel and all that. And so a lot of guys don't know how to deal with women today. What was wrong with that?
I'm not sure you're asking the right guy, because I've never had a problem.
Yeah.
I've never had a problem.
Right.
I've always had plenty of girlfriends.
Yeah.
And I have had strong women in my life. My mother was a very strong woman. My Aunt Dorothy was a very strong woman. My aunts were very strong. And so I've never had an issue with women.
So are the guys afraid of the women?
I think a lot of people have postponed getting married.
Yeah.
And I think they're doing it for all sorts of reasons. Part of it is economic. It's hard to buy a house.
Yeah.
You know, my dad bought the house in our family in 1959, paid $14,000 for it. My dad worked 2 full-time jobs as a janitor, had a stay-at-home wife, and still was able to buy a house in L.A.
Yeah.
You cannot do that if you work 3 full-time jobs that are minimum wage. It's not possible.
I bought my first house for $20,000 when I was 25.
Yeah.
And it was right down the street in the Jewish area. So you know it's in a nice area. And it was 2 big bedroom, living room, dining room, guest home in the backyard, everything. It was $20,000.
Yeah.
And my note was $300 a month. And then I got it without any down payment because I assumed a loan.
Yeah.
Isn't that amazing?
It is amazing.
It's not like that anymore. I was 25 at the time.
I think another problem is this, too, Jesse Lee. If you look at the top achievers, academic achievers in the inner city high schools, almost all of them are women.
Yeah.
More black women are in college than black men.
Yeah.
And generally speaking, women want somebody who's their economic equivalent. You know, we'll be with anybody, but women want somebody who'll be their economic equivalent. One of my friends said, no romance without finance.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of black men have fallen behind economically, and a lot of black women see them as not peers.
Amazing.
And as a result, there's a problem.
That's a sad story.
It is.
I want to ask you about your father and growing up in South Central L.A. Mm-hmm. While growing up in South Central L.A., did you ever imagine that the things you have done, you know, that you'll be able to do or what happened to you in your life?
I always knew I was going to be successful, but the level of success I have blinds my eyes. I remember my Sunday school teacher, Mrs. Bailey, once asked me why I was so driven. I've always been driven.
Right.
And I said, and no one ever asked me that before. I was probably, I don't know, 10 or 11 years old when she asked me this. And I had to think about it for a second. I said, well, Mrs. Bailey, I just want to see how far I can go before somebody stops me.
Amazing.
And she started laughing. She said, that's a very good answer.
At 11 years old?
Yeah. And so I always wanted to be a writer. I knew I was going to be an athlete. When I was in, I think, kindergarten, the teacher said, line up on one side of the blacktop and run to the other side. And everybody had their shoes on, regular clothes on, and it was boys and girls. Class of 35 people. And I ran as fast as I could, and I finished in the bottom third. Almost every guy ran faster than me, and many of the girls did too. And I knew right then and there I wasn't going to be an athlete, even though I love sports, still do. So, but I always liked writing. And virtually everything I wrote early on got published. And there's a drug when you write something and you see your name in print and other people are reading what came out of your head. Yeah. So I always knew I was going to be successful. But the level of success, again, blinds my eyes. I'll give you an example. I was never a fan of movies, but my older brother Kirk, who's no longer with us, was a huge fan of movies. And he used to take my little brother and me, Dennis, down to Hollywood Boulevard and look at the stars on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. And my brother, don't ask me where it came from. There's no internet in those days, but he knew who they were. Mary Pickford, he knew who that was. Douglas Fairbanks, he knew all these different stars. Fatty Arbuckle. I mean, I am now on the Hollywood Walk of Fame. I have a star on Hollywood and Vine, southeast corner. Are you kidding me? I gave a speech at the Ronald Reagan Library, and I talked about my mom and my dad. I said my dad never knew his biological father. He left home at the age of 13. His mother was irresponsible. He cleaned up trash. He did this. He cleaned toilets. He became a Pullman porter on the trains. He became a Marine World War II. Got out, couldn't get a job, even though he could cook better than anybody I could imagine. Ended up working 2 full-time jobs as a janitor, and then started a small cafe in his late 40s, which he ran until his 80s. I mentioned my mom grew up on a farm. My mom always told my brothers and me, nobody can make you feel inferior without your permission. And my father and mother always said, hard work wins. You get out of life what you put into it. You cannot control the outcome, but you are 100% in control of the effort. And before you moan or groan about what someone did to you or said to you, go to the nearest mirror, look at it, and say to yourself, what could I have done to change the outcomes? I said that in my speech. And my first book, called The 10 Things You Can't Say in America, had just come out. And I said, by the way, my mother and my father are here. Randolph Elder, Viola Elder, please stand up. And it was a room full of people, about 300-400 people were there. And they stopped my speech, and they stood up, and they applauded my parents.
Amazing.
And Jesse, when the speech was over, there was a line behind my father with people holding up my book and had a pen, and my dad is signing my book.
Nice.
And I'm at the podium looking at this. And I said, only in America can something like this happen.
Yeah.
I've had 2 nationally syndicated TV shows. One was a court show called Moral Court, which is excellent. They canceled it too soon. Another one was a show kind of like Oprah called The Larry Elder Show in 135 markets in America. I've been a radio host for almost 30 years. I was in 300 markets. 1.5 million people heard me every single day for years. I won an Emmy. I was featured on 60 Minutes. I was featured on 2020.
So are you sure you're not white? Are you Jewish?
I live in a very nice area of LA. I have a lovely girlfriend. Jesse, one time you met her, first time you met her, we talk about it a lot. You said, she's so beautiful. She's so beautiful. I said, Jesse, am I supposed to be with somebody ugly? Why is that so shocking to you?
She was very pretty.
And
I'm like, how did Larry get this woman?
And so many things have happened to me.
So you're not white?
And also when I was growing up.
Larry, you're a black man in America. We are told that is not supposed to happen.
You're not going to throw me off track. Also, when I was growing up, there was a columnist I liked named Art Buchwald. He was a satirist. And I'm probably now in middle school, and I wrote a column similar to the kind of column he writes. I gave it to my mom. And my mom read it, and she said, Larry, this is every bit as good as Art Buchwald. Yeah. Someday you could be a syndicated columnist. I am a syndicated columnist. I've been writing a syndicated column for Creators Syndicate since April of 1998. I'm in about 80 different newspapers or websites. And I've written over the years 1,200 columns. And on the campaign trail, I met somebody from Newsweek, and they've asked me to write a column for Newsweek once a month, and I've agreed to do that. I've published 5 books. 2 of them were New York Times bestsellers. Again, what I have done with my life blows me away. I bet. And there's no way that somebody could have told me that. I was shy when I was a kid. I didn't talk very much. In fact, I had a teacher who used to complain how quiet I was. Yeah. And I said, when I have something to say, I'll say it. Nice. So I saved it all up, and now it's all coming out.
Yeah, amazing, man.
Yeah. And the people I've met, the places I've gone, the encounters I've had. From meeting presidents to meeting governors to meeting senators to meeting major actors. Again, I just sometimes sit there and I just cannot believe it's me.
I bet, man.
It's almost like watching a movie, watching somebody else.
Are you a Christian?
Oh, yes.
You're a Christian.
My pastor is Pastor Jack Hibbs at the Calvary Chapel Church of Chino Hills. And they, by the way, have a big mentoring program like you do. Literally go door to door mentoring young black men. And they've had programs where they do this in Harlem, places like that.
Nice.
It's a wonderful church. He's a wonderful man who's a product of a failed abortion, by the way.
Nice.
Mm-hmm.
So let me ask, do you have fear? I've been just giving the time, we don't have much time left. Do you have fear?
The only fear I have is the Almighty, but no.
And so how did you...
Worst that can happen is somebody can shoot me.
Right.
And seriously, and if somebody shot me and somebody wrote my obituary, it'd be full of stuff. If I hadn't achieved the kinds of things I wanted to achieve and my life ended, that would bother me. But right now, I am playing with house money.
How were you able to, other than practical fear, you know, you don't want to go out and let yourself be hurt, but how were you able to overcome inner fear that all human beings have, and how were you able to overcome that?
I think the biggest thing people have is self-doubt. And self-doubt is a river. And I don't care how confident you are, you're not always that confident 24/7. Right. And it ebbs and flows. And having people around you who respect you and love you will give you that kind of foundation. And having been raised by parents who love you always gives you a certain kind of foundation. Somebody once said, a father's job is to let his children know you got what it takes. Yeah. My father always told me I got what it takes. So no matter how much kind of doubt I have, and on the campaign trail, I'm coming out talking to 20,000 people, I'm doing a debate. I'm up on stage with the governor of Iowa in front of a bunch of people. It's a heavy kind of thing, and it's always a little bit of nervousness, but it almost always goes away, not because I worry it away or think it away. It's because I've done this so many times, I know I can do it, and it's just a matter of making sure that I'm prepared.
When you are all alone, you're not busy, you're not on the road, you're not doing anything, and you're in a room all alone, how do you deal with those moments when you're all alone and the thoughts trying to tell you that you're nothing, you're never gonna be nothing, you're this, you're that, you're not important? Most people can't handle that. How do you deal with that? I just don't have thoughts like that.
They
don't come at all?
Not that negative, not you're never gonna be anything, you're not
what
gonna be important.
What type of thought you get when you're alone?
I was watching a documentary of Darryl Strawberry and Dwight Gooden, two young New York Mets phenoms. Darryl Strawberry went to my high school, Crenshaw High School.
I remember him.
And his father was an alcoholic who told Darryl Strawberry, you're never going to be anything. Here's a guy who was on the path to have a Hall of Fame career. All he had to do was not drink and not do drugs. Yeah. And he always had at the back of his mind, you're never going to be anything, no matter what he did. I don't have that. My father told me I was a bad blank. My mother told me, one time
You told you was a bad blank?
I was going to say bad A, yeah. This is a family show, I didn't want to say that.
Right, I'm glad
I left practice of law and I started a small headhunting firm, placing lawyers with law firms and corporations. And one time I placed this guy making $250,000. I get 25% of every placement I made. So you can do the math on that. I was telling my mom about it. And my mom said, Larry, I am in awe of you. When your mother, who you respect dearly, tells you she's in awe of you, that gives you a foundation that never goes away. So when I'm by myself and maybe I'm thinking about, do I want to do this or want to do that, and there might be some degree of self-doubt, it isn't deep, it doesn't last very long, and it's easily swatted away.
Oh, good.
That's how I feel.
Right on. Long story short, because of time, I know at one point you said that you and your father didn't get along.
We didn't talk for almost 10 years.
Can you tell us, with the time we have, a little time we have left, what happened that made you and your father distant, and what brought you back together?
Well, I disliked my father because I thought he punished us too harshly. My father was from the South, and they would spank their kids pretty harshly.
Yeah.
My dad had a belt, And if he thought we did something wrong, he'd take out the belt and he'd whip us. And I thought it was absolutely, and still think, it was excessive. I was a kid who all you had to do was sit me down and tell me what to do, and I'd do it. My little brother was much more hard-headed, but I was not like that.
Right.
But he treated us all the same way, and I really resented it. But all of us disliked my dad. My older brother, my little brother, all of us intensely disliked my father.
How did your mother feel about him?
Well, I talk about it in a book I wrote about my dad. It's called Two Lives, Dear Father, Dear Son, 2 Lives, 8 Hours. And people ask me about how did your mom deal with it. My mom did not think we were being punished too harshly.
Oh, good.
And I don't think so now. Right. At the time, I did.
Right.
So my dad starts a cafe when I'm 10 years old. I had to work for the SOB. I didn't want to work for him, but I had to. And my dad would yell at me in front of people. When I say cafe, it's a diner, and everybody can see what's going on. Everybody can hear what's going on. So it's embarrassing. So I worked there when I was 10 to 15 years old. Now I'm 15 years old, and my dad's still yelling at me. And I said, Jesse, next time this guy yells at me, I'm out of here. Nobody ever defied my father. So my father yelled at me. I didn't have enough guts to leave. He did it again. I didn't have enough guts to leave. But he did it one time, and I did. I walked out. And in fact, it was full of people during rush hour. The waitress had called in sick, so my dad was there by himself. And he was not too happy about it when he came home. Yeah. And I'm laying on my bed in my bedroom. My dad comes in and he goes, "Why did you leave?" And for the first time I spoke back to my father. I said, "Dad, I got sick and tired of the way you spoke to me, and I'm not putting up with it anymore." My dad paid me $10 a day plus tips. He balled up the $10, threw it at me as I lay on my bed. He walked out of my bedroom, and we did not have another conversation for 10 years.
Wow.
And when I say not a conversation, I mean nothing. I was in high school. My dad worked long hours. I knew what the hours were. I just made sure we were never in the same part of the house at the same time. I graduate from high school. I go to college in the East Coast. I would come back to visit my mom, but I would never be in the room with my dad. Law school, never be in the room with my dad. Now I'm 25 years old, Jesse. I passed the California bar. I passed the Ohio bar where I was living. I was making the equivalent of $150K, and I'm 25 years old. I should be living large, and I can't sleep. I know it's because of my dad. Yeah. I never thought we were going to be friends, but I knew that we needed to resolve something. So I called my secretary. I said, "Cancel my appointments. I'm going back to LA. I'll be back in a few days." So I flew to LA. Didn't tell my parents I was coming because I didn't want my dad to prepare. Took a cab from LAX to the restaurant, which is in the Pico Union area, and I walk into the cafe. And my dad was shocked to see me. It's 1:30 when I walked in. They closed at 2:30. And I had a couple big pieces of luggage. My dad said, "Should I put your luggage in the back?" I said, "No, Dad, I'm only going to be here for 5 or 10 minutes. I want to tell you something." I was going to tell him what a horrible father I thought he was. I figured he'd tell me that I was an ungrateful son. 5 minutes, 10 minutes, out the door. At least maybe I'd be able to sleep.
All right.
So Dad said, "Wait until we close." So I sat there, and I sat there for an hour, and I said, "Now, Larry, don't tee off on the guy. Just give him the Cliff Notes, and then get out of here in 5 or 10 minutes. So my dad sat down. I was still this close. I teed off on him. And Jesse, you know how I can go. Yeah. I spoke for 20 minutes nonstop. The time you whipped me in front of my best friend Carl, the time you whipped me in front of my cousin Elaine, who's visiting from Cleveland, the time you did this, I told him everything I could tell him. And after 20 minutes, I was out of ammo. And my dad said, "Is that it?"
Amazing.
"You didn't speak for me for 10 years because of that?" Let me tell you about my father. Now, 25 years old, this is the first time I've heard this. "You know your last name, Elder?" I said, "Yes." He said, "That's not the name of my father." I said, "What? Who's your father?" "I have no idea." You never met your father?" "No." "Well, who's Elder?" Elder was the man who was in my life the longest. He was an alcoholic who physically abused my mom. And when I tried to stop it, he would beat me up. My mother was illiterate. She had a series of men she lived off of. She didn't want to work. And when I was 13 years old, he said, I came home. I started quarreling with my mom's then boyfriend. She sided with the boyfriend and threw me out of the house, never to return. And for the next 8 hours, Jesse, my dad explained to me what he did with his life. Picked up trash. He did this. He joined became a Pullman porter for the trains. That's how he came to California. This is before the war. Athens, Georgia. My dad's from Athens, Georgia. He said, I went to this place called California, this city called Los Angeles, and you could walk in the front door of a restaurant and sit down and get served. My dad always had packages of crackers and cans of tuna with him because he never knew if he'd be able to get a meal.
Right.
And he said, I made a mental note, someday I'm coming back to California, to Los Angeles. So he told me his whole life story, and as he's talking to me, he's getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And I'm getting smaller and smaller and smaller. Yeah. And now I'm crying. And I said, Father, please forgive me. And my dad said, it was nothing to forgive, you just didn't know, and he just went over his rules.
Right
just
on,
follow
man.
the advice I've always given you and your brothers. Hard work wins. You get out of life what you put into it. You can't control the outcome, but you're 100% in control of the effort. Before you complain about what somebody did to you, go to the nearest mirror, look at it, and ask yourself, what could I have done to change the outcome? And finally, he said, Harry, no matter how hard you work, how good you are, sooner or later, bad things are going to happen. How you deal with those bad things will tell your mother and me if we raised a man. And from that moment on, my dad and I were the best of friends for the next 35 years.
Right on. Amazing.
Mm-hmm.
I know you said you were so angry at him that you decided you weren't going to even make children because of that.
Yeah, I disliked my father so intensely, Jesse. I never wanted my kid to feel that way about me, so I decided early on I wasn't going to have kids.
Wow.
It wasn't until I got older that I realized it didn't have to be that way.
Yeah.
And I deeply regret now not having had kids. Yeah. People always tell me, well, it's not too late. Well, I'm 72 years old. I'll be 72 in April. And
so you think 72 is too late?
Yeah, I do.
Abraham was not 100.
Well,
and Sarah was 99.
As good a condition as I think I'm in, I'm not sure I'm going to make it that far. My dad lived to be 95 years old.
Wow, amazing. So listen, I got to put you on the hot seat.
Okay.
And I need you to answer these questions as quickly as possible.
All right, I'll see what I can do.
All right.
The hot seat.
Do you agree that the more degrees a person has, the dumber they are?
More or less, yes. Can I give you a quick example? Jared Bernstein is Joe Biden's top economic advisor. He has a degree in music, has a degree in philosophy, has a degree in social work, has no degree in economics, but he is his top economic advisor. Just saying.
Nice. What is a man?
You mean that anatomically or in terms of character?
What is a man?
Somebody who stands up for himself, who adheres to his convictions, who has good character. That's a man.
Did you take the jab?
Unfortunately, I did. I have comorbidities. I have high blood pressure. I have a very rare blood disease, and my Yale-educated doctor suggested that I do it. Looking back at it, I would not have done it.
Should blacks be allowed to call each other the N-word?
Depends on the relationship. If it's a private kind of thing, that's one thing, but to say it publicly, it's another thing. I was at a mall once, and a bunch of black kids were, mostly white people at the mall, a bunch of black kids were running around. One of them said, hey, N-word, come over here. And it just made me cringe. It's one thing to say it, you're in your room, you're watching TV, you're watching a football game, and your buddies. It's another thing to say it publicly. A friend of mine is named Tim Shanahan. He's Muhammad Ali's best friend. Most people don't know that because Tim never wanted anything. He never tried to get any money off him. They were deeply good friends, which is why Ali trusted him so much. He tells me when he calls Ali, he says, how you doing? And Ali says, and Tim is white. Ali says, just a nigga trying to get bigger. And once I get bigger, what you have is another bigger nigga. Ooh. And this is how they talk to each other. Yeah. This is a friendship.
When your girlfriend get mad at you, does she call you the N-word?
No, she's not, never. Although I tease her and I go, you were this close. Right. You were this close. She goes, no, I wasn't. Yes, you were this close. No, she doesn't.
Is climate change real?
The climate is always changing. Always. Is the world 10 years from extinction unless you take some drastic action to get rid of fossil fuels? Hell no. It's one of the biggest scams I've ever seen.
Mexican food or soul food?
Nina prefers Mexican food. I prefer soul food.
True or false, abortion is worse than slavery?
It's very different. I mean, abortion is the extinction of human life, and slavery is control of human life. They're both evil.
What is love?
True love is unconditional concern for somebody else, and it's very, very rare. It's kind of love that you find between a mother and a father, a mother and a son, a mother and a daughter, a father and a son, a father and a daughter. It's very, very, very rare.
Do we need more white babies?
I'm opposed to abortion, irrespective of the color of the baby.
Is the earth flat or round?
It's not even round. It's more of like an oval kind of shape, but it's not flat.
Has anyone ever told Harpo to beat you?
Harpo? Harpo Marx?
You know who Oprah made that movie, Color Purple?
Oh.
You told Harpo to beat me.
No. I thought you meant Harpo Marx. is that the one who doesn't speak?
Yeah.
Or the one who plays the
Harpo, yeah,
plays the, what do you call it? The string, you know, what do you call that thing? Thank you, Harpo.
What, Harpo?
Thank you.
Oh, was Jesus white or black?
He was neither. He was, I think I've heard the word Semite.
That chicken had lips.
No, but they put him in popcorn. Put him in hot dogs, rather.
Does the bear shit in the woods?
I think so.
Did you have fun?
I did.
Thank you for coming, man.
My pleasure.
It's amazing. Tell the host how to get this book. This is an amazing book.
Go to Amazon.com or BarnesandNoble.com, and it makes a perfect stocking stuffer. I know that Christmas is too late, but if you didn't get somebody a Christmas gift, you can say it got lost in the mail. And it's all about my race for governor and what I would do to turn around California. I talk a little bit in the book about my relationship with my mom and my dad, with Jesse and I did. And it's about what I think America needs to do to turn itself around. So all that's chucked in there. And it's a nice, readable book. It's well-written, in my humble opinion, and even people who don't like to read have read it and said it's a nice, fun read. You can do it in 2 sittings.
It is.
Yeah.
It's easy to read, too. Mm-hmm. Did you have a website, anything you want to give out?
One of the other things I didn't mention that I've done in my life is I executive produced 2 documentaries.
Oh,
you're in the first one.
Uncle Tom.
Uncle Tom. In fact, you're in
I'm
both
in
of
both of them. Uncle Tom
1 and 2. And I executive produced it.
It was amazing.
It was amazing.
It really was.
All I'm asking people to do is go to IMDb and read the reviews. And people are saying it's the best documentary I have ever seen.
Yeah.
And I think it will change the lives of a lot of people, a lot of black people, if they were to see it, and stop them from being what I call victocrats, and they're recognizing that the power is in their own hands. Life is still about choices, no matter what your circumstances are. You pick up your cards, as my dad did, and you deal them to the best of your ability.
That's
and
right.
in America, this is a land of the free and the home of the brave. As you and I are talking right now, there are Haitians lining up to get a lottery for a chance to come to America.
Yeah.
And here we are, people born and raised, whining about racial oppression. It is completely nonsensical, and it's only hurting the very people that people purport to care about.
Give me a yes or no, if it's possible. Will you run for governor again?
No.
Will you run for president again?
No.
You will not?
I'm done.
Are you going to be in the Great White Hope administration?
Depends on the job offered. I don't believe I want to be in the cabinet because I don't want to move to Washington, D.C. for that. However, if he were to ask me to be his vice president, and I don't believe he will, I'll do that.
Nice. Mm-hmm. Amazing. Mm-hmm. Well, thank you for coming, Larry.
My pleasure.
I do appreciate it. And don't forget, folks, to check us out, go to locals.com. In the description, there's the support our work, and TheFallenState.tv. Like, follow, ring the bell, tell everybody. All right?
And follow me on Twitter @LarryElder, and go to LarryElder.com. And be sure to go to YouTube and watch Uncle Tom. I think it costs $1.99 to watch it.
It's amazing. You will not regret watching Uncle Tom.
It'll change your life.
1 and 2, but especially 2. Yeah. But both are really good. Mm-hmm. Amazing. So thank you all for coming, tuning in. Let us hear from you. Guest ideas, let us know. We do appreciate it. Thank you, man.
Thank you.
Amazing.
Amazing.